Okay, good morning. Welcome back to Shmuel Bet. We'll dedicate this shiur to the memory of Anne Barclay's mother, who just sadly passed away today, Peter, yesterday?
Last night.
And we wish Anne Chaim Urukim. She's off to Scotland to be with the family. And I'm sure that our thoughts are all with Anne in this difficult time. And she lost her father not long ago as well, didn't she?
2 months ago,
Yeah, so it's tough. Our thoughts are with her. Please pass our best wishes to her and look forward to her coming back to happier times.
Thanks, Johnny. Thanks very much.
Amen.
Okay, let's get into Shmuel Bet. Anybody remember where we left off with some homework last week?
I do,
You want
because I
to know
wrote it
why
down.
David Curses came back on
Say
him?
that again. Say that again, Paul.
You wanted to know why David's curses didn't go onto Yoav, they came back onto him.
Yeah. We were going to look at the Gemara in Sanhedrin, if you remember. That's right, Paul. Did you have any ideas about that?
You told us not to look up the Gemara, so
So you didn't. Well, that's one bit of homework that was easy, wasn't it? Don't look up the Gemara. Yeah. Right. Well, before we go to the Gemara, let's just go. I'll put the text on the screen first, the Shmuel Bet, and we'll just have a little chat about the text itself, and then we'll go and look at the Gemara. So we said that David did these curses on Yoav, and let's just find them and look at them. Here we go. Here we go. May it rest upon the head of Yoav. Here we go. Verse 29. Have you got the text on the screen? Yeah? Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's chapter 3, 29. Yachulu al Rosh Yoav ve'el kol beit aviv. May it rest upon the house of Yoav and all his father's house. Just as before we go further, just as an aside, those of you who were at the Esther shiur yesterday, which live is only Leslie, I think, and Peter was there as well. We spoke about Esther in that the pivotal pasuk im hacharesh tacharishi yamod revach v'atzala yamod leYehudim mimakom acher va'at ubeit avich tovedu. If you remain silent, the Jews will be all right, but you, ubeit avich, and your house of your father. This is in some ways, if you think about it, what Mordechai was saying to Esther was a sort of a curse, really, wasn't it? He was saying, if you don't step up, you and your father's house will be lost. It wasn't a curse saying, wishing it to come upon her as such, but it was a description of something bad that will happen to her. And often when you're talking about those things in Hebrew, often invokes your father's house. And there's a reason for that, of course. And here it does as well. It says, al Rosh Yoav. It could have just said, Yachulu al Rosh Yoav, but it adds in ve'el kol beit aviv, because it increases the curse. To curse your father's house does what? It actually increases the curse for generations to come, doesn't it? Because your father's house is the dynasty, the generations to come. If you just curse Yoav, well, when Yoav's dead, that's the end of the curse, right? But a curse that is El Kol Beit Aviv, and all the house of his father, or in Esther's case, you and the house of your father will be lost, that's a much stronger curse. It's a much stronger negative thing because it's involving the father's house as well. So, and we'll see actually, like we just said before, these curses that David gave to Yoav came back on David, but not on David himself, but on David's descendants, right? So in effect, it came on Beit Aviv Shel David, nachon? He came on the house of David, right? Not on David himself. David never got these curses. It was David's house. So the fact that it says El Kol Beit Aviv is actually relevant. So these are the curses that he said on Yoav. Va'al yikaret mi beit Yoav zav. There should be a people who have a zav, an issue. It means they should have this illness. This basically some kind of venereal disease, as they used to call it back in the day. They don't call it that anymore, do they, Peter? They call it STDs. But yeah, it used to be called VD in my day, but it's now called STD, sexually transmitted disease. So a zav is some kind of disease of that area. Tzorah, that's some kind of well, we know what tzora'at is, some kind of leprosy or not. Umachazik bafalech, and somebody who has to lean on a staff. What does that mean?
Lame.
Yeah, it should be a cripple, right? He's going to need to have a stick to walk with. V'nofel b'cherev, and somebody will fall by the sword, meaning that he'll die a violent death. V'chasar lechem, and he won't have anything to eat. It's a pretty nasty curse, that, all around. You know, he should have horrible diseases, he should be crippled, he should die by the sword, and he should have nothing to eat. That's a pretty comprehensive curse that David gives to Yoav. And the Gemara tells us that these curses actually came on David, and we'll look at that in a minute. So the question is, why should they come on David? Normally, a curse comes on a person when that curse that you give is not deserved. So in other words, if Reuben curses Shimon, and Shimon had no reason to be cursed, then, and it was a sort of a, if you like, an unfair curse, then the deal is that it comes back on Reuven. It's a bit like what? There's a halachic thing on that, which is very similar. Anybody know what I'm talking about or thinking about? What halachic situation is there where the punishment comes back on the person
False
intending
witnesses.
Yes, thank you. I'm struggling with my words here, but you read my mind nicely, Michael. False witnesses, Eidim Zomamim. Yes. So if there are false witnesses come along and say, for example, I saw so and so doing a particular act which would result in a punishment, and it turns out that they were false witnesses, and there's a proof, and it is found in court that they were false witnesses, called Eidim Zomamim. The punishment is for those false witnesses, whatever it was, the punishment that they would have caused the person to have that they were accusing falsely. So if it was a capital crime, if the false witnesses came along and said, I saw somebody murder somebody, and the punishment would have been a death penalty, then those false witnesses get the death penalty. It's a serious business being a false witness. If it was a monetary matter, whatever the cost would have been to the victim of this false accusation, then they have to pay that fine. So in other words, if the false witnesses said, I saw Reuven borrow 500 shekels from Shimon, and he's not paid it back, and it turns out that that's a false accusation, then they would have to pay the 500 shekels themselves. So it's the same with this curse. If a person curses somebody else improperly, then it seems that HaKadosh Baruch Hu works it out that those curses come back on the person giving out the curses unfairly. Yes, Paul.
Well, it wasn't exactly a false curse because he did what he was complaining about. But on the other hand, when Yoav came and complained about Avner to David before, he didn't actually say, no, you're not right, he's a good guy now. He just let him go, and then he went off and did his thing. So he was sort of partly responsible.
Excellent. You must have read this Gemara in a previous existence, Paul. because that is exactly what the Gemara says, and we will look at it in a minute. So yes, and and again, isn't it amazing how all our shiurim seem to sort of become confluent? Because we were talking in one of the shiurim, I can't remember which one it was, about the concept of shtika kehoda'a damye. Silence is acquiescence. When were we talking about that? I can't remember. Which shiur was it? Was was it the Gemara shiur this week we were talking about it? So this is the same thing, really. You're quite right, Paul. Let's go and have a look and see what happens. Let's look at the words. Avner says, I'm off to go and make peace with everybody and bring everybody under David's kingship. And off he went. Now, verse 23, Yoav turns up after the event. And Yoav came, verse 24, came to the king and said, what have you done? Me'asita, hinei ba Avner elecha, lama zeh shilachto vayelech haloch. Why have you sent him off so that he's gone? Yadata et Avner ben Ner ki lefatot chaba. Don't you know he's a spy? He's come to do you, to pull out wool over your eyes. He's a spy. And you've bought it, hook, line, and sinker, you Dumbo, right? And he's going to know all, right? We spoke about this. He's going to know all your outs and ins. In other words, he's going to know all your war plans. Going out and coming in refers to war. Remember, we spoke about that a couple of weeks ago. He's going to know all your war plans. And you've sent him off back to the enemy camp. And he's a spy. And so what does David say? What's his response, Paul? Nothing. He doesn't say, no, Yoav, you're wrong. He's a good guy now, as Paul just said. No, he's seen the light. He's crossed the floor. He's now on our side. He doesn't say anything. He remains silent. Silence is acquiescence. Shtika kehoda'a damye. Silence is equivalent of acquiescence. Elie Wiesel, I think it was somebody told me that it was Elie Wiesel. I think it was Sharon that pointed it out. That was Elie Wiesel who said, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to remain silent. And this is a case where David remained silent. Silence is acquiescence. Yoav, therefore, is entitled to think what? That David agrees with him. So Yoav takes, as it were, his own initiative. He doesn't have to ask permission from David. David has given his tacit agreement to the fact that Yoav is right and that Avner is a spy. Yoav doesn't have to ask for permission. He's the chief of staff. It's his job to look after this whole, that's his job. He's got to go off and sort it out. And so off he goes, verse 26, Vayetze Yoav me'im David. He goes out and off he goes and does in Avner under the fifth rib.
Something keeps coming into my mind, and try as I will, it doesn't go away. Avner and David. Avner wasn't pro-David way back in the day with Shaul. He wasn't somebody who would have allied himself with David or supported David or even spoken to Shaul to try to, mollify him or appease him or whatever when Shaul was chasing him. And it's possible that David was of two minds about Avner anyway. He accepted his offer to come across to him and to unify, but he gave him conditions, and it's quite possible that David wasn't wholly going with this on his own, so he didn't really have anything to say to Avner, because he couldn't say, he's a good guy, I trust him, but he didn't want to exactly encourage Avner because he knew he was a hothead. So he didn't say anything.
I think that's a very fair assessment, actually, Hannah. I think that's a very fair and considered assessment. I think it's very likely that David was not 100% convinced, because how could you be? You know, you're absolutely right. Avner was a chief of staff of somebody who was trying to kill him and spent years running away from him. I agree with you.
Well, then why would David give the death sentence to him as a later stage for Solomon to carry out?
Okay, so this, I think, is a demonstration. You're right. I think it's a demonstration of the complexity of human nature and the complexity of life. Life is not black and white. And often we read, I can only speak for myself. In years gone by, let's say, I have read Torah and, well, not so much Tanakh because I never learned much Tanakh, but I've read the Torah and other things, and I've seen things and I've been taught things as very much black and white, right? My pet subject, yeah, kindergarten Judaism. We are taught in kindergarten, and it's reasonable to teach this in kindergarten, that things are black and white, right? Yaakov was good, Esau was bad. Yitzchak was good, Yishmael was bad, right? Abraham was good, Lot was bad, right? But life is not like that, right? As we get older and we mature, we ought to be able to understand that there are nuances. And David is a great example himself, right? David HaMelech, right? Was he perfect? No, he was not perfect by a long way. Was he a good man overall? Yes, he was a good man, because he wrote Tehillim. He said he was, he recognized his sins. Yehuda, let's go further back. David's ancestor, Yehuda. Was he perfect? No, he wasn't. He was responsible for the sale of Joseph, but he did tshuva. He sinned, if you like, with Tamar, but then he said, "Tzadka mimeni, she's more righteous than I." So this is the complexity of human beings. And for me, it's one of the most important parts of the Torah. Now, I come back to this many, many times, and possibly because I think it's one of the most important things that we can learn from the Torah. And it's one of the things that we're just not, well, I wasn't taught properly in all of the learning and teaching that I had coming my way in my childhood, in my youth, and my adulthood. It didn't show me this complexity of individual personalities, of our heroes, and of how complex life is. And I think that what Hannah has said and what Michael has said today is a very, very good example of this. Here is David. What is he to think? Avner, the chief of staff of somebody who was trying to kill him, has now come over to him. Maybe he's a Trojan horse. Is David 100% convinced? He can't be. He can't be 100% convinced, because that wouldn't be normal. He wouldn't be. I mean, David was a savvy guy. We know that. He was a very good leader. He was a very good general. He was a good military man. He's not going to be naive in that. So that he must have had some lingering doubts about Avner's trustworthiness. Okay, he probably thought about it, and on balance, I think I can trust him, and off he sent him. But he must have had some misgivings, as Hannah has said. And then think about it. This is human nature. If you've got a little bit of a misgiving about something, right? Let's just say, for example, I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody suggests to you, if Philip's on the line, he probably can't get in. Let me just see if it is something that he wants to get in. Yes, Philip?
Hello, let me in, please.
Let you in. You're not in the waiting room. Try again. Go out and come in again, because you're not in the waiting room. Thought that might be that. So think about this. Somebody suggests to you an investment, right? And you do your homework and you think, could be a good investment, this. Might not be, might be. And you decide, all right, I'm going to take a punt. And you invest a certain sum of money in this investment, whatever it is. And then the next day, once you've done it, somebody comes along and says, hey, you know what? Somebody offered me this investment, and I don't think it's any good. I think it's a rubbish investment, and I think it's a rubbish investment because of A, B, C, and D. And you've already done that investment. How are you going to feel then? The doubts that you had are going to be magnified, aren't they? Right? Has that ever happened to you? It certainly happened to me, where I've thought maybe yes, maybe no, and then somebody else has come along after the event and said, "Nah, you shouldn't have done that." So this, I think, may well have happened with David. Right? David's in two minds over Avner. On balance, he thinks he trusts him. He sends him off to do the deal with Binyamin. But then Yoav comes along, and bear in mind, Yoav is his trusted general at this point. Yoav has not done anything wrong at this point. He's not killed anyone that he shouldn't have done. His most trusted general comes along and says, David, you dumbo, what did you trust him for? He's a spy. For sure, David must have then had some doubts about it. So I think Hannah's assessment is actually a very, very acute assessment. And maybe that is why David didn't say anything, because he's thinking, oh, I made a bit of a rick here. And that's why he didn't say anything. However, that's not how the Gemara sees it. The Gemara sees it how Paul said it in the beginning, which was, he didn't say to him, no, you're wrong. And therefore, he, by his silence, he acquiesced to Yoav's actions, and therefore he was partly responsible himself for the death of Avner. And because of that, the Gemara says that the curses that he gave on Yoav for doing this came back and bounced back on his family. Let's have a look in the Gemara now and see how the Gemara actually explains that to us, because it's quite interesting. So you ought to be able to see the Gemara now. Can you see that on the screen? Yeah, good. Yeah. Okay. So, right, here we go. There we go. Right, here, this Gemara here. There's our little, see that little sign there, that little S thingy there? That's our little sign to tell us that's where this particular subject begins. Vayetze Yoav mein David, vayishlach malachim acharei Avner, vayeshivu oto mibor hasira. And the Gemara is talking about our pasuk in Shmuel Bet, where Yoav goes out from David after this conversation, and he sends messengers to Avner, and he brings him back from this place, Bor Hasira. Remember, we asked, where is that? And the place, we said it was an Arab village just north of Hebron. How do we know it must have been north of Hebron? Because Avner has left Hebron, where David is, and he's gone north to Binyamin to go and make the deal with Binyamin and the rest of the tribes to come under David. So he's gone north. He's not got very far. He's got to Bor Hasira, and Yoav's messengers have said to him, come back. Right? Come back. And it was what? It was a deception. Does that remind you, by the way, of another time when somebody sent out messengers for somebody to come back and it was a deception? Anybody? Who sent messengers to bring some people back and it was a deception? Come on, Paul, it's on the tip of your tongue. I can see it. I'll give you a clue. It involved a theft.
Oh,
Yosef.
Yosef, yes. Yosef sends messengers to go and bring back the brothers to accuse Binyamin of stealing his cup, yeah? They've all gone, and where have they gone? They've gone from Mitzrayim back towards Canaan. What direction is that?
North.
North, correct, same idea. They've gone north, right? So Yosef sends these messengers to bring back the brothers and to accuse Binyamin of theft. Yoav. Maybe that was a Freudian slip there when I said David, because we've just been talking about David having some responsibility for that. But Yoav sends messengers and he brings him back from this Bor Hasirah place. Now the Gemara asks a question. My Bor Hasirah. Why is this place called Bor Hasirah? Which literally means a well and a thorn. Well and a thorn. Now, we need to just remember that in Tanakh, the names of places are very relevant, right? For example, just came into my mind, Mei Meriva. What was Mei Meriva? What was that place?
Where they didn't have water in the desert and they were grumbling.
Correct. They were grumbling about water. And what does Mei Meriva mean? Mei, the waters of, Meriva, grumbling, right? Another example, Kivrata Ta'ava. What's that place called? Kivrata Ta'ava. What was that about? Well, what does that mean? Kivrat. What's a kever?
Burial place.
A burial. What's Ta'ava?
Lust.
Lust. Yeah. The burial place of lust. What happened at Kivrata Ta'ava?
God gave them the quails.
God gave them the quails, and then they all died, right? Why did they want quails? Because they lusted after meat, right? So the place names reflect what went on in these places. A better example, perhaps, where did Yaakov have his dream?
Bet El.
Bet El, which means
House of God.
House of God. And where was it? Har HaMoriah. So names of places, and in fact, the Torah tells us about Bet El something else. What does it say about Bet El? They had a different name before. Anyone remember the name of Bet El?
No, it's not Kiryat Arba.
No, that's Hebron. Luz, remember? Luz.
No,
It used to be called Bet El, and then it used to be called Luz. Anyway, the point is that names get given their names because of what happened at that place. So that's why this Gemara is asking itself, why is this place called Bor Hasirah, the well of a thorn? It must be something that must have happened there to have been given that name. It's not just given the name Londinium or something. I don't know what Londinium meant in Latin, but it would have had a reason for it. But there's a reason for being called Bor Hasirah. Amar Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, Bor Vasirah Garmu Lo Avner Sheyeh Hareg. It was called this place, this well and a thorn, because Avner, it caused Avner Tsoros, it caused him this problem, and he got killed there. Now, what's going on? Bor Vasirah Garmu Lo Avner Sheyeh Hareg. There were two things that caused Avner to be killed. Now, somebody asked a question, can't remember who it was now, but somebody asked the question, why did Avner get killed in the first place? What did he do wrong? What did he do wrong? He was on his way to do a mission for David. Why did he deserve to get killed?
Was he killed Yoav's brother?
But we've already said that was not a reason to get killed, because Asael was a Rodef.
That depends on who you talk to.
All right, okay, so Asael was a Rodef. And even if it wasn't a Rodef, it was Bamilchama. It was in a war. We've said that. We went into that in detail. That's not a reason to kill Avner. There must be another reason why Avner was killed. This Gemara is going to tell us there were two things that Avner did that he shouldn't have done, or didn't do what he should have done, and he caused him to get killed. Have a look at this.
Oh, wasn't Avner involved with 12 soldiers fighting 12 soldiers?
He was. That was his idea. You're right. He was certainly responsible for that. That's not what this Gemara says, actually, but you're right. Let's have a look at the Gemara. The two things that caused Avner to be killed, I'll just read out the Safaria interpretation because it says it beautifully. Avner became liable to be killed when he failed to take advantage of two opportunities to bring about a reconciliation between King Saul and David. Now, I've taken it off the screen so you can't cheat. What were they? Two times Avner could have brought about reconciliation between David and Saul and didn't do it. What were those two things? What were the two things that he failed to do? Bearing in mind, Avner is in charge of Shaul's army and was Shaul's main bodyguard.
When David didn't kill it, when David didn't kill, didn't injure Saul in the cave.
Yes, very good. That's one. And, well, that's two as well, actually. Yes, well done, Hannah. Let's have a look at what the says here. First, when David cut off a corner of Saul's robe after he entered a cave in order to relieve himself, remember that? Shaul went into the cave. David happened to be there, cornered him, pardon the pun, and then cut off the corner of his robe, as if to say, what did he as if to say? I could have killed you, but I didn't, right? So the second time was when David found Saul sleeping and took the jug of water and the spear from next to his head. The two times when David could have killed Shaul and didn't, what the Gemara is saying us here, look at this. Rather than tell Saul that David could have killed him and refrained from doing so, Avner suggested to Saul that his robe may or must have been torn by a thorn bush, right? And the jug of water must have been taken by his own men. These two incidents are alluded to by the words bor, a well, i.e. a jug of water, and sirah, a thorn bush. So says the Gemara, when the pasuk says mibor hasirah, this was a hint to the reason why Avner was killed. Well, one second, Paul. I've also got questions, but I'll come to you in one sec. What this is, Gemara is trying to demonstrate is that Yoav was killing Avner for a wrong reason. However, in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's calculations, Avner did deserve to die. And so Yoav, although Yoav killed him for the wrong reason, he deserved to die.
Most probably was the wrong time as well, because he was just about to go back to arrange a treaty between the two sides. And hadn't he been killed then, all of this, David would have been king much, much earlier.
Okay, and that is why Yoav gets his punishment in due course. Somebody asked me earlier on, why did Yoav get a punishment on him if he was doing a proper job? And this is a good example, and we'll see it as we come all together, how occasionally we get a glimpse into how HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts together the pieces of a jigsaw. I haven't forgotten you, Paul, coming to you in a minute. How HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts together the pieces of a jigsaw, right? We see, looking back, taking the zoom lens out, if you like, we can see now Avner needed to be killed. Okay, so Yoav did it. But Yoav shouldn't have done it because he shouldn't have avenged the death of Asahel because that was in a war. But Yoav also prevented David's kingdom from being united for 2.5 years, and therefore he deserved something else. And so in the end, he got that. And David perhaps deserved something because he remained silent when Yoav said he was going to kill Avner, or implied he was going to go and kill Avner, and he didn't object. And so he deserves something. So the curses came back on him. And we see just a little bit, looking out from a further away, we see the mosaic and we can see the pattern just a little bit. Occasionally, we get a glimpse of the workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how it all works. If you go too close in, you can't see the wood for the trees. You can only see the little pieces of the mosaic. You can't see the full picture. And so that's just a little example. I think it's a good example of how we see things knitting together. We get a little glimpse. I wouldn't like to say that we see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu works. Who knows? Certainly not me. But occasionally we just get, a little schmeck. When you walk into shul on a Shabbos morning and there's a cholent on the hot plate, you just get a little sniff of the cholent, and you can imagine how good that cholent's going to be from that schmeck. This is just a schmeck of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu works. Just a little sniff. Occasionally we get to see it. Go on, Paul. What's your objections?
Well, I think it's unfair, entirely unfair, because on both occasions, Shaul recognised that David could have killed him. So, there was no opportunity to reconcile, because he was, in a sense, reconciled at that point. It just didn't last because of Shaul's state of mind. But he recognised that David, and those references to the well and to are they actually in the text?
No, of course not.
The
Midrash.
It's doubly unfair.
Yeah. Okay.
Art Scroll disagrees with the Gemara.
Okay, that's good. We'll come to the Art Scroll in a second then. Paul, let me take your 2 points. The first one I don't agree with, that it's unfair because Shaul knew it anyway. Doesn't matter whether Shaul knew it. Avner's crime was to try and persuade Shaul the opposite. Not that David had cut off his corner of his coat and could have killed him. He said, no, David didn't cut off your coat. It was a thorn bush, right? Shaul wasn't having any of it. Shaul knew the story, right? But doesn't just because Shaul didn't believe him, doesn't absolve Avner from the guilt of trying to cause an aggravation between Shaul and David, or the opposite, failing to try and bring a reconciliation. So I don't agree with the first point that it was unfair on Avner. The second point, I've forgotten already. What was I saying? But it's a midrash. Yeah, it's a midrash. So you don't have to believe it.
Yeah, it seems to be put in there to try and put a reason for the punishment when it wasn't really there.
Okay, it's actually put in there to try and give us a reason why the name is called Bor Sirah. And you may look at that and say, "Nah, I'm not buying that." And you're fully entitled to do so, because this is the opinion of Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, and it doesn't say that you have to believe Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana. I showed you weren't there, obviously, but yesterday's Dvar and Dvash, I deliberately showed a Gemara which demonstrated how you can have two completely opposite views, which are mutually exclusive, from two very, very important and serious sources. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in the Gemara, they don't get any higher than Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. And with the story of Kriyat Yamsuf and Nachshon ben Aminadav, we all know the story. We all know the story that he jumped in and went right up to his nostrils. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir, on the same situation, says, no, he didn't. What he did was throw stones at Shevet Binyamin because they went in first and he wanted to go in first, and he stoned them. And so according to Rabbi Meir, Nachshon ben Aminadav, who was the priest of the prince of Yehuda, not only was he not the great guy that we all thought he was a rotter, because he threw stones at Binyamin, and that's Rabbi Meir. And it says completely the opposite of Rabbi Yehuda. And so I deliberately brought that Gemara yesterday to demonstrate how I was talking there was one of our guests over Shabbat was a son of a friend of mine who was come for the Shabbat Chatan that we made, his nephew of the Chatan, and he's a yeshiva bocha in Mir Yeshiva, and we were talking about this on the way back, and I was saying to him, the Chazal say that even a Sefer Torah has mazel, right? How can a Sefer Torah have mazel? So there's one Sefer Torah in the Aron Kodesh which you read from every week, and there's another Sefer Torah at the back there. Nothing wrong with that Sefer Torah, that you only read out once a year on Simchas Torah, right? And you pull it out because you need 3 or 4 Sifrei Torah for the various different readings. So this Sefer Torah's got mazel, you read out of it every week, and this one's got less mazel, you only read it out. And the rabbis say even a Sefer Torah has mazel. You know, even an opinion in the Gemara has mazel, right? The opinion of Rabbi Yehuda has mazel that we all know that Nachshon was a great guy. What about poor Rabbi Meir? His opinion, nobody even knows it, right? Unless you've happened to have learned that Gemara in Saita. So, you know, it's important to know that there are differences of opinion, and you don't have to believe all of them. You can't actually believe all of them because some of them are mutually exclusive. So if Paul and the Art Scroll don't like this Gemara, then that's perfectly okay. Hannah, tell us what the Art Scroll says, please.
The Art Scroll says that Avner decided. Avner and Yoav, yeah, with the 12 soldiers, they met accidentally. Although Yoav wanted to fight with Avner, when it says that the Radak says that when he realized that Yoav's troops, that Avner, I'm doing that because Avner's opposition to David, but changed their plans when they realized Avner's forces were superior. Now, the Malbim says that the two parties met coincidentally, and they decided to have a duel between 12 and 12 soldiers to show their expertise in sword fighting. But the duel turned deadly, and they ended up killing each other, at which point all the soldiers got into it and there was a bloodbath. Now, Yoav apparently said when they wanted to stop them dueling, he referred to the spilling of blood of young soldiers as playing. That comes from the Midrash Vayikra. Yeah, Yoav says, let the young soldiers arise and duel and play. Yeah,
okay, well, let me stop you there. Look on the screen. This is chapter 2, verse 14. This is what Hannah's talking about. This is where they met before they had the 12 verses 12. Vayoma Avner el Yoav, Yakumu Hanarim, Vayisachaku. What's the word for a game in Hebrew?
Mishak.
Mishak. Let them have a game before us. Vayoma Yoav Yakumu. That's a good idea, he says. Okay, let's have a game. Carry on, Hannah. This is the pasuk there. I just wanted to show you
now,
the pasuk.
Because Avner referred to the spilling of the young soldiers' blood as a game, he deserved to die, because the whole thing led to a bloodbath afterwards. There's also another reason here, because he delayed the crowning of David for 5 years.
Okay.
7 years.
No,
David
5 years. 5 years. Yoav was responsible for the remaining 2.
So the reason I go with the bloodbath reason better, because that seems to me more midah keneged midah. Yeah, you caused the soldiers' blood to be spilled, and therefore your blood is spilled.
Very good. I like that. I think that's fair. Now, the Malbim there's one thing I would perhaps just think about what the Malbim said. The Malbim said that they met by coincidence. In other words, Yoav troops and Avner's troops met by coincidence. I'm not so sure about that, to be honest, because when we learnt it that actually Yoav. Look at verse 13, which is the one just before that. Yoav ben Tzeruya, va'avdei David yatzu, va'yifkashum al brichat givon yachdav. They went out, yatzau. What have we said about going out and coming in?
It's to do with war.
That has to do with war.
It's to do with war. So I think that the Mefarshim that say not like the Malbim, the Mefarshim that say that Yoav actually went out looking for a fight.
That's what the Radak says.
Right. So
The
the
Radak
Radak
says that.
right. So I think
or what?
when we learnt this, when we learnt this,
Where are you going?
when we learnt this together a few weeks ago, we learnt like the Radak that Yatsu meant that Yoav went out looking for a fight with Avner. And in fact, you could argue, and maybe this is what the Radak says, you could argue that actually Avner tried to reduce the damage. Instead of having a full-out war, which is what happened in the end anyway, he tried to reduce it to a 12v12 in the same way, and we learned this together a few weeks ago, in the same way that Shaul and the Philistine had a one-on-one with David and Goliath. Same idea. This was a 12-on-12, but the same sort of idea. So it's interesting. There's another example. The Radak and the Malbim. Okay, the Radak is earlier than the Malbim. The Malbim was in the 19th century. Radak, I think, was in the 16th century, if I'm not mistaken. But both fine gentlemen, or as my old rabbi used to say, they were both Jewish men, right? And there they have completely opposite views, right? The two things are mutually exclusive. And that is the beauty of Shivim Panim LaTorah, right? You don't have to, you're allowed to say, I like the Radak and I don't like the Malbim, or I like the Malbim and I don't like the Radak. You're allowed to say that, okay? And those of you that have been taught, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim, all the words of Hashem, that's correct. But I was taught they're all the words of Hashem, and you can't say that this one is wrong, which is fine. I'm not saying they're wrong. What I'm saying is I prefer this explanation to that explanation. And if you are not allowed to say that, as I was taught I'm not allowed to say that, then that's actually removing any kind of personal, I don't know, thought processes going on. You just then become a parrot of somebody else's views. My nephew, who is a Rav in Montreal, when he was in Cambridge, he studied theology in Cambridge, and he had an exam to do, and they asked a question, and he wrote an answer that said, this is the answer that you want, this is what Rashi says, and this is my view. And he gave 3 different answers to the question. And I thought, good on you. That's that. I mean, if I'd have been marking that exam, I'd have given him 110% in that, because that's showing knowledge and showing some kind of thought processes of your own, using your own intelligence. So for me, it's very important to know that there are different opinions which are mutually exclusive. And in effect, he pays your money, he takes your choice, whichever you prefer. Now, there'll be many times where Paul and I will not agree on which one we want to go with. But there may be times when we actually agree, and that's wonderful. But it doesn't matter if we don't agree, because you're entitled to your view and I'm entitled to mine. And that is the beauty of Shivim Panim LaTorah. But we all have to use our own nous when you're learning. And it was one of the problems that I always had with learning was, and I think I've told you this before, is that my teachers were more interested in telling me what so-and-so said about it than hearing what I had to say about it, and hearing my thoughts about it and my colleagues in the class's thoughts about it. And that is not the way, that's not the way I think we should be learning. And that's why I'm much more interested in Chidushei Poleg than anything else. When you come up with stuff that nobody else has come up with, to me, that's much more valuable than parroting out something that we've read in the art scroll, interesting though the art scroll is on this particular occasion. Right. So
the important thing is not to fall out over it, though.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Right.
You have to do it in a nice way and in a respectful way. And you, at the end of the day, you have to say, I have to agree to disagree. Or no, you're not even really disagreeing. You're saying, I prefer that pshat and you prefer that pshat. And sometimes you might say, I don't like either of them.
Johnny,
Yes, Peter.
can I ask you about the word sirah, bor hasirah?
Yes.
Sirah in Hebrew is a boat. What's the connection? I'd never heard of it's used as a thorn bush.
Me neither. Vesira, it calls him a thorn. Let's have a look and
Can be
see.
a cooking pot or something, but
Yes, seer. Yes, seer is a cooking pot.
yeah. So Sirah.
Let's have a look and see.
Sirah is a sharp instrument.
What is a sharp instrument?
Sirah.
That's with a tzadi, no?
Sirah.
Sirah.
Sirah is a boat.
There we go. There we go. There we go. Oh, genius. Not me. What should we call it? Google. Look at that. Sirah Kutsanit. It's Sarcopoterium. Right? There it is. Oh, you knew that, of course, Peter, didn't you? Sarcopoterium.
No, I'm just reading.
Sirah Kutsanit. What's a kots in Hebrew?
God.
Kots is a thorn. Kots is a thorn. We know that. Kots is a thorn. So Sirah, there you are. It's a thorn bush. Not only is it a thorn bush, it is actually the Sarcopoterium thorn bush.
Yeah.
Oh, that is brilliant. I love it. Let's go to Wikipedia and we'll have a look at what this Sarcopatorium is. Sarcopatorium spinosum, obviously because it's got thorns. Gavoa ad 40 centimeter, it grows at a height of 40 centimeters. Va'anafeha, and its branches, kutsaniim utzfufim. They are very close together and they're thorny. In other words, a thorn bush.
Very good. Okay.
There we go. Thank you for asking that question, Peter. Gave us an example of how the internet can be such a wonderful tool. Don't let anybody tell you that the internet is evil. The internet is not evil. People who use the internet can use it in an evil way, but the internet can be used for wonderful things, like finding out what a Sirah Kitzonim is. There we go. How wonderful is that? Right. Where are we? Let's carry on in the Gemara. The Gemara says that that's what caused Avner to be killed. He missed out on 2 opportunities of reconciling David and Saul, and thereby, I suppose, postponing the unification of the kingdom by those 5 years. So those 2 things really are one and the same thing, aren't they? Because had he reconciled them, as this Gemara is telling us he should have done, and had he reconciled David and Shaul wouldn't have been fighting. Shaul had already been told David was going to take over. There would have been a peaceful transfer of power, right? Like in the White House. No, Michael doesn't like it. You can tell us in a second why you don't like it, Michael. And there would have been, 5 years earlier, there would have been this reconciliation. Why don't you like it, Michael?
Because the mental state of Shaul, as been said previously, was so bad that whatever Avner had said to him, he wouldn't have believed it anyway. So I think that's a red herring.
That's a bit like what Paul said.
Yeah,
It doesn't absolve Avner from the crime, even though it's a bit like the work I do, right? As you know, I work in medical negligence, and so in the UK at least, in order to have a case, you have to have 2 things. You have to have what's called a breach of duty, and then you have to have something called causation, right? So if a surgeon in the middle of an operation takes off his mask and spits in the wound, everybody would agree that is a negligent act. But if the operation goes well and that spit in the wound does not cause an infection and everything works out wonderfully, then that spitting in the wound caused no damage to the patient. Despite the fact that it was a negligent act, there is no damage. Okay? And this is the same situation. Avner did something bad. He failed to reconcile David and Saul when he might have had a chance of doing so. The fact that it didn't cause any damage because that Shaul wouldn't have believed him anyway doesn't alter the fact that Avner did something bad. And so unlike in British law where the patient gets nothing in that situation because there's been no damage, Avner still deserved to be punished. So I give you the same answer that I gave to Paul. Michael's not happy with it, but it's the best I can do.
No, let's go a little bit further. Avner knew that Saul was a little bit off his rocker, so to speak, and therefore, if he had actually said something, it wouldn't be beyond the possibility that Saul would actually do in Avner for actually having the audacity to tell him what to do.
Okay, let's go there. Maybe. Does that mean that it is if you've got something important to do, which is the right thing to do, that you keep quiet because of danger to yourself? That doesn't sound a very honorable thing to do.
Well, it depends how bad he thought Saul was.
I suppose you're right. I suppose you're right, because we spoke about this in one of the shiurim as well last week. Hochiach tochiach et amitecha. You have an obligation to tell off to rebuke your brother if he's doing something wrong. Yeah, we spoke about that. If you see somebody doing an aveira, it's your obligation to tell him to do it the right way. I think we mentioned wearing your tefillin in the middle of your forehead. Yeah, we mentioned that this week. But that only is the case if A, you think they're going to listen, and B, there's not going to actually make it worse. So you could be right on that, Michael. You could be right on that Avner's thought processes might have been, I'm not getting involved here because he's such a meshuggah, he might turn on me. Yeah, I can see that. All right.
On that giving up telling, in fact, Al Rob said you had to try 100 times before you could give up.
Well, I think again, it depends on what the response is going to be, because you can make it worse. Remember, I told you that little story about my partner and the mezuzah upside down, right? Those of you that remember that story, I'll say it briefly for those of you. I don't know which shir it was in. My partner once was called out to see a sick kid at night, and he rang on the doorbell. And as he opened the fellow opened the door, the father, my partner stepped inside and said, "Oh, by the way, your mezuzah's upside down." And this fellow went ballistic and said, "I've come here for you to get my kid better, not to tell me a religious thing. I'm not interested. Just come and see my kid." And I said, in retrospect, I mean, David did it in all good faith. I mean, he wasn't saying anything nasty or anything, just thought he was being helpful. In retrospect, it would have been better to have done it on the way out once he's cured the kid or given the kid some treatment, when the father wasn't so uptight about everything because he was worried about his kid. So, in retrospect, it would have been a good idea not to have said something at that particular point. So I think you've got to, I don't agree that you have to do it 100 times before giving up. I think you've got to be sensible about this. If you've done it 2 or 3 times and he hasn't listened, then he's probably not going to listen, and you're probably going to make it worse. But it's a judgment call. I grant you it's a judgment call on that. Right, we're out of time. We haven't done very much today, have we? We've rabbited on a bit about all sorts of things. What have we done today? We've looked at this Gemara, and we've seen a little bit about maybe a little glimpse of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts things together, because Avner deserved punishment for whatever, maybe because of these 2 opportunities he missed, or maybe for something else, maybe because he killed Asahel, maybe a bit for this and a bit for that. Yoav also deserved punishment. So we haven't yet got to the question, which is we got to the question of why David. We did answer the question of why David's curses came back on him, and that is because he kept silent. We had a very interesting idea that he kept silent possibly because he wasn't sure, and Yoav coming along has actually increased his anxiety about whether he was right or not. And I think that was a very well put point. We also saw the Radak and the Malbim disagreed on the 12 verses 12 situation. The Malbim said that they met by coincidence and it was all a bit of a game, and Avner shouldn't have been so cavalier with people's lives, having dangerous games like dueling. Radak, on the other hand, said Yoav went out with intention to war, and Avner was actually trying to minimize the casualties. So there's another example of 2 people with opposite views there. So we had an interesting discussion about that. What I want to do next week is actually to finish this piece of Gemara and to see how it works out that the curses of David came back on his own family. So that we had those curses. Let's have a look at those curses again just before we finish. Let's just have a look at what the curses were. Who can remember the curses before I put them back on the screen? What were the curses?
Sarat.
Sarat was one.
He would be lame.
Lame was another.
STD.
STD.
And fall by the sword.
Fall by the sword. One more.
Starvation.
Yeah. Lechem. What did you say, Michael?
Starvation.
Starvation, yeah. So those things. So we've got to look. We've got to find in the future, not the future from now, obviously, the future from then, we have to find where did those 5 curses come back and bite David on his descendants. Okay? 5 things that happened to David's descendants, that there were curses that he made to Joab that came back on his descendants. That's hopefully what, will we be doing it next week? No, we will not be doing it next week because I will be on my way to Australia next week. I'm afraid we won't be having a Sunday shiur for the next 3 Sundays because I'm traveling to Australia and I'm traveling back on a Sunday. So the next Shmuel Bet shiur will be 4 weeks from now. So I will have to listen to the end of this to know what we're going to do. That's what we will do in 4 weeks' time in the Shmuel Bet shiur. Any comments or questions regarding what we've done today?
Just to wish you Mazel Tov.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Nesiya Tova. Nesiya Tova.
Thank you. Thank you. The
And
rest of this.
Sorry. And to
The
wish
rest
the
of-
wife Ben Mazel Tov also on a bar mitzvah.
Yes, you've also got bar mitzvah,
And
haven't you?
to wish the Westbrooks Mazal Tov. on their mitzvah.
So wait a minute. Well, let's get all these Mazal Tovs. We've got Yitro, that's the Weitzman grandson, yes?
Yes, and the Westbrooks.
And the Westbrooks. Okay. And Yitro, Mishpatim is mine. Anybody else got a Mazel Tov coming up?
Mod Pesach, we've got a bar mitzvah.
Okay, we've got time for that one. Mazal Tov in advance. Okay. So the rest of this week there will be shiurim, but from next week there will be none from me for a couple of weeks. So those of you who are going to be with me the rest of the week, I'll see you the rest of the week. And the rest of you, I'll see you in 4 weeks' time. Ezrat Hashem.
God.